wannabe old video game collectors. Well, good for you. You guys are going to have a very good hobby. Now, there are certain things you need to know about old video game consoles, such as the NES over here. There are quite a bit of components that you guys should already be aware of, due to the fact that you guys have probably owned video games before. Let's go over these little elements now. Now, while there are many different consoles you guys could choose to collect for, one we're going to focus on today is the NES. Alright, suppose you guys go to a flea market or a garage sale and you happen to find one of these things lying there. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, that thing's old. It's not worth my time. The graphics suck, all the games are too short, some of them are too hard. Well, you shouldn't leave that thing go. First of all, this thing, as of 2012, this little console is about, say, 35 years old. That's a pretty old console, and I'm pretty sure since it is pretty much the console that made Nintendo famous, one day this thing's going to be worth a lot of money. So the $5 you spent to pick this thing up could eventually turn to thousands of dollars. Well, let's say that you're not going to just let this thing sit in a closet all that time. You're actually going to want to play with it, right? Well, that means you're going to have to pick a few things up and hope that you just won't find this box by itself. You're going to need some pretty essential things. You're going to need a cable that connects this thing to the TV, the AV cable. You're going to need a power thing. Usually you don't find these things in you don't find the original brick anymore, but you can easily find a compatible AC adapters at, you know, retro game stores or Game Trade if you live by Mesquite. And of course, you're going to want to pick up a game. Now, if there's any game you should ever play on NES, you should probably pick up a Mario game or something. Like, for example, Mario Bros. 3, classic. And it's a pretty common game, shouldn't be too hard to find. As long as you pick it up from the same garage sale, it shouldn't cost you too much money. So now you have everything you need to pretty much own an NES. But of course, owning an NES isn't just like, say, owning, you know, like a pet rock or something. An NES takes love and care in order to maintain it. You can't just let it sit there for 10 years. You have to actually, you know, dust it off and clean it once in a while. Or else, you're going to get the blinking screen or the rainbow screen of death. That's pretty much the red ring. Except, that's actually fixable. But we'll get more into that later. So when it comes to buying any video game console, it's always important to check whether it comes with a power cable. Usually it does come with one, but when you go to a flea market or garage sale and you're trying to get something as cheap as possible, you usually end up not having a power cable. So it's always important to check what kind of power cable your console needs. In this case, the NES needs a pretty specific one that outputs 9 volts. Now you have to make sure that it is 9 volts. If it's below 9 volts, your NES won't be powered properly and you won't be able to play games on it. And if you put it over 9 volts, you're going to blow up your NES. And you're probably going to cause an electrical fire. But don't be worried. Any adapters that can power the NES are actually pretty common. You can get them at any Walmart. Or you can get a specialized one from a game store. It's they're not that expensive, and you can pick one of these for like $8 or $3 if you're cheap enough. Now this might go without saying, but it's also pretty important when you buy a power adapter that you check whether the plug on the other end fits. For example, if you buy the wrong plug, say a Super Nintendo adapter, thinking, oh, it's Nintendo, it'll work anyway. Well, guess what? It doesn't fit the hole. It's too big. So, you have to make sure that the plug you buy fits. See? Regular Nintendo one? There you go. Now you have power. So, after you have all the power cables sorted out, it's very important that the first thing you do after that is to test to see if your little $5 investment actually pays off. Because if the thing doesn't work in the first place, why bother with any of the other steps? So, here we go. Ah, a red light. That's a good sign. Alright, so the NES works. But, that doesn't always happen. Something else might happen that's even worse. Now, not all NESs are expected to work. For example, sometimes you might run into an NES that does this. Uh-oh. That's not good. Blinking light, that's pretty much the 1985 version of the Red Ring of Death. Now, of course, there's no need to panic. Usually when you get a blinking light, that usually means the game inside is dirty, or you just need to clean out the contacts inside the NES, which is a pretty simple procedure. So, don't fret, it's a pretty easy fix. Most people like to be able to see what they're doing when they're playing video games, so it's important that you get the right kind of HV cables in order to plug it into your TV. Fortunately though, the NES doesn't require a specific cable. In fact, it uses common RCA cables to plug into a TV. So pretty much, you can go to any Walmart and give the cashier $5 and you can walk out cables that plug into the TV. No HDMI cables, no Xbox cables, or rotten 64 Genesis cables. Nope, just simple plugs. And all you have to do is plug it up to the TV, because pretty much any TV has these plugs in them. And if your TV doesn't, well, then I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. So the second most important part of any video game system is the controller. Here you have the iconic NES standard. This controller pretty much revolutionized how game controllers worked. It used to be that there were huge old joysticks protruding out of it. They had some of them had like 12 buttons. Some of them had these weird disc things, or they had knobs. Well, now you got control pad, start and select buttons, and pretty much fire buttons, A and B. And you can see its influence today, because this is pretty much how every controller since has been set up. You don't see any of huge old joysticks anymore. You might see them with little analog sticks. But overall, this is what set up the modern controller. But of course, not everybody was happy with this controller, or they felt that it wasn't powerful enough to handle their playing skills. So they thought that buying another type of controller might be able to aid their gameplay. So they came up with the NES Max controller. Pretty much this thing was more comfortable to use as it was more ergonomically shaped. It also had a weird analog pad that's pretty similar to one currently found on the 3DS. It has the same A and B buttons and start select buttons, but you notice that it has two gray buttons in addition to that. They're turbo buttons, meaning that instead of having to repeatedly tap the A or the B buttons, you could just press those turbo buttons and hold them. Same thing as just rapidly tapping. Trust me, that saved a couple of fingers. Another accessory that has something to do with controllers is the NES Force Score. What this little accessory allowed you to do was plug in 4 controllers into one NES. Pretty much the precursor to the multi-tap. So instead of having the standard 2 plugs, you just plugged in this thing, and you can have 4 players in one game. Now, of course, not that many games utilized 4 players, but it was nice to know that they could do it if they wanted to. A little bit more of obscure controller is the NES Quick Shot. This thing was more suited to playing games. Of course, the only game I've ever played that has any use for it is Top Gun, and Top Gun isn't exactly a very good game. Now, with the Force Score, it also allowed you to plug in another one, but then we come to the beast of all the NES controllers, the NES Advantage. Back when the NES was around, games were more focused on simulating arcade games than they were original IPs. For example, this controller was more suited to the console ports of Pac-Man or Galaga. But it could be used for the NES games too, and sometimes it might have been even better. Now, of course, the standard did everything it could to get rid of huge joysticks on the controllers, but sometimes a huge joystick might provide for better control. Now, some things that the NES Advantage had it's pretty much a giant version of the Max, except it's also improved. Instead of having the turbo switches, had a knob that controlled how fast the controller was tapping the A or the B button, which could be used with us at certain times. It required good timing, and you could use the knobs to time the taps. It could also be used. It also had a slow button, which slowed down certain games, and I mean certain as in what it did to work was that the button just repeatedly pushed the start button. So if a game had a start menu or a pause menu or a pause screen, then the slow function didn't work and you just ended up with a horrible mess. But it also helped that the buttons were way bigger, which made them easier to hit. So if you collect for NES, you have and these are just a short selection of all the controllers available with the NES. These are just the major ones. There's also famous ones like the Power Pad or the Power Glove. I dare you to try those things. The second most important part of any video game console is, of course, the games. Now, in the case of the NES, all the games come in these nifty little gray cases called cartridges. Now, I know what you're thinking if you're too used to your Xbox, PS3, or Wii. What the heck is that thing? It's disgusting. I don't like looking at it. But, actually, there's one thing that makes these cartridges way better at doing their jobs than the discs. These things are pretty hard to break. It is known that some NES cartridges have been able to withstand 5-story falls. Now, I'm pretty sure if you tried to drop a disc from 5 stories, it would shatter the moment it hit the ground. And even if you managed to glue all the pieces back together, there's no way that game would ever run again. But with these cartridges, the memory boards inside weren't harmed. All the shock went to the case itself, meaning that if you just put it in another cartridge, the game still worked. So that makes it a joy to collect for. The thing about the games themselves is that the NES has a very diverse, spectrum of games. It's not all Mario games or Nintendo games. There's plenty of other things to suit your needs. Now, of course, collecting every game is a monumental task, knowing that there's over 1,000 different games coming from the NES, and there are still some that are being discovered pretty frequently. Now, in case you guys want to know, the most valuable game for the NES is the gold cartridge of Nintendo World Championships. And usually when a copy goes up for sale, it usually sells for over 20 grand. That's a lot of money for something you find in a garage sale, huh? So now you want to start actually playing games. So what you first have to do is open this door, and you just have to put the game in. It's that simple. And then all you have to do is push the power button. So you turn this thing on, and, well, let's turn this thing on and start playing some games. Oh, cool. Uh-oh. That's not good. Let's try this again. Reset. Uh-oh. Still got ourselves a gray screen. Uh-oh. Let's take out the cartridge and shove it back in. Uh-oh. That's not good. So the game didn't work. Well, what do you do now? Obviously the game must be broken. There's no fixing it now, is there? Wrong. Oh, so wrong. Usually when a game doesn't work, all you have to do is clean it up. Now how do you clean it up? You blow into it, right? No, don't. Right. Despite what you might have heard about these cartridges, don't ever blow into them. Because those little contacts in there will start to corrode if you put your own darn spit in there. What you need to do is you need to find yourself some 70% rubbing alcohol. Don't use anything else. Oh, yeah. Don't spit into the darn thing, just get a Q-tip and clean it off, and your game will start to work. Seriously, despite everything you might have heard about cleaning these games, do not ever blow into them. You will ruin the game. Forever. Because once those contacts get corroded, there's no cleaning them anymore. And not only that, you're putting your spit inside the NES, and if you put the spit inside the NES, then that thing stops to work. And all of a sudden you have two things that don't want to work anymore. All because you were too lazy to get out a Q-tip and wipe it. Alright, we finally got it to work. Sweet. Now that you finally got your game working, you can start enjoying the old 30-year-old video game